And welcome back to the Cooler Jets podcast. We're hosts Ben Blessington and Michael Nania. Well, Michael, recording this Friday night. We've had a few days now to recover from whatever the hell we just watched on Monday night. I'll be honest, I've been just kind of been in a haze this entire week, just going through the motions, figuring out how the hell did we get to this point from all the excitement we had last week to now talking about Zach Wilson entering week 2. But I'll be honest, Michael, today is a new day. I've turned the page. I feel a lot better about the Jets' chances this season. And, we've heard from Rodgers. There's been some positivity on that front. So I feel a lot better than I did the last time we recorded on Tuesday. I'll go to you, though. How are you feeling, man?
I think I'm doing pretty good. I'm optimistic, looking to the future. And I don't know. I think the years of Jets fandom have prepared me for this moment. Not that anything can match this level of disappointment, because with everything we've been through, this easily tops all of it without a doubt. But despite that, I do feel prepared for this, and I feel like we've been through these kind of moments many times before, and I've just been able to master the art of knowing that you got two decisions at these points. You could either just continue to mope about it, or you could be optimistic and look forward. So I'm choosing to do the latter. So we had all this excitement throughout this offseason. We still love the majority of the rest of this roster, and I'm not going to let that go to waste and give up just yet. So looking to the future and ready for whatever Sunday holds.
Yeah, and who knows what this season holds. It's certainly not the season that we all saw coming, but I have to say, Michael, I still think this is a playoff team, and I said that on Tuesday, but I stand true in that. I do think this is a team that makes the playoffs, and that's no small feat. I know we entered the season, trying to make a Super Bowl run, but this team hasn't been to the playoffs since 2010, so that is a definite win if they're able to accomplish that goal. It's not going to be easy, but they have the pieces, I believe, to make a run. It all comes down to one man, and that's Zach Wilson, and that's how far can he carry them. He's not going to necessarily have to carry them, but he's going to have to make some big plays and some big throws in key spots. This defense and run game can win games for them, and it can take them certain places. But if you want to win in December, if you want to win in the playoffs, he's going to have to make those key 3rd and 7th throws. And that's really what this season is going to come down to, is how much better has an offseason with Aaron Rodgers made Zach Wilson? How much better is Zach Wilson in year 3? At some point, we'll get Rodgers on a sideline or in his ear, and that should help. How much better is Zach Wilson in a different offensive system? And how good is this team to be able to carry Zach? We're going to talk about the Cowboys game, but let's just go back real quick and talk last thoughts on the Bills game now that we've had a chance to watch the All-22. What were your thoughts on Zach Wilson's game, seeing the All-22 and the ultra-conservative approach? But he did make some key throws in some key spots, and that ultimately contributed to winning that game.
Yeah, I thought it was an okay performance overall, but really I think the biggest thing in regards to looking forward and what this game means for his future is understanding the context of the whole situation, because this is the exact predicament that for me throughout this whole offseason I was looking at as the nightmare scenario, and why I didn't want him as the backup quarterback. I would imagine this exact thing playing out. Imagine Rodgers goes down and he's got to go out in front of the MetLife Stadium crowd that booed him off the field multiple times last year.
He got booed off the field his first ever home game.
Exactly. So like it for a player like him who, is jittery on the field, has had confidence issues, both on and off of it, it just seemed like a nightmare scenario. And for him to have to do that on the first drive of the season is just amplifying that by, 10 times. And despite that, he didn't have a terrible game, and he actually protected the ball much better than the veteran quarterback on the other side. So I think that's the biggest thing to understand, is like, this was not a perfect game. Absolutely not. And there's still work to be done, but the table was set for this to be an absolute nightmare for him, but it wasn't. And he did get off to a rough start. He had a terrible interception in the first half, but he didn't let it snowball from there in the way that he has in many games before, like that Patriots game you mentioned, like the Patriots game he had last year when he threw a bad interception at the end of the first half. We've seen plenty of times where he'll make a mistake like that, and it'll just get worse and worse from that point. But in this game, he didn't let that happen. He came out and he had a stronger second half in the face of all the pressure that he was under. So that's the biggest thing for me, the fact that, he was able to come out in the worst possible circumstances he could face. And that's not to say he was amazing or anything like that, but for this particular player in this situation last year, we saw him, in this exact situation when he was called back upon earlier than expected, when Mike White went down, and he's playing at home in front of this crowd in big games, and he wasn't up to it. But in this game, he was in the spots where they needed him to be in that second half. So I think that's the main takeaway. But, looking at it more, specifically, I think there were promising takeaways, carrying over from what we saw in the preseason. I think he's getting better at, making the layups. He's not missing as many of those easy throws. Like, how did you throw that screen in the dirt? How did you throw that pass into the flat above somebody's head? We didn't see much of that in the preseason, and we didn't really see it in this game either. That's not to say his accuracy is perfect, but he's not missing those easy throws anymore. And I think that's a very important first step for him, because missing throws like that throughout his career it's made it tough for him to get into a groove when, it's first down, you're trying to hit a screen just to get something going, get to second medium, or if it's second down, trying to get to third and short, whatever. He hasn't been able to do that, and he's put himself in bad downs and distance because he can't make the easiest throws. But now I think he's making those a lot more consistently. So that's one thing I took away. And number two, I think the pocket presence was better. There were definitely some instances in this game where there was pressure, and he stood there, and he made a throw in the face of it instead of running away from it. There was the Lazard throw in the first half where there was some late pressure, and he threw with anticipation in the pocket. Obviously, there's the Lazard throw later, maybe the biggest play of the game, the biggest turning point for the offense. That 24 or so yard throw where it was, I think, 3rd and 5, and he was getting pressured. He's falling down, flicks it over to Lazard. Not a lot of quarterbacks can make that play. And it's a play that I don't think Wilson would have made in the past, because there was some edge pressure behind him, but instead of running away from it, he stepped up and he made that play. And then I think the throw he made to Garrett Wilson after that was fantastic, putting it low, protecting Garrett Wilson. It had a lot of velocity on it to fit it in the tight window. So I thought there's better pocket presence and poise in the face of the pressure. So there was some good stuff in this game to take away. But at the same time, it's still a 140-yard game. It was still a very safe game plan where, the Jets protected him and they wanted to play it safe and win with the defense. And they tried not to give him too much to do. So still a lot of room for improvement, but I think there has been some tangible progress in important areas where he'll have to improve if he wants to become the quarterback that they need him to be.
How sustainable do you think that formula that they used against Buffalo is, in terms of run the ball, heavy 12, heavy 13 personnel, really don't put too much on his plate, a lot of screens, short, quick passes, RPOs, but nothing downfield, not too many true QB drops. I mean, how sustainable is that throughout an entire season? Do they have the talent to be able to run that wing T offense that they were essentially running Monday?
I don't think it's super sustainable. And the reason why is, you can look back to last year to see it, especially after Breece Hall went out, because, teams started to stack the box because they didn't respect Zach Wilson to beat them deep. And it made the run game a lot tougher to stop. And fortunately in this game, Breece Hall was able to break loose for a couple home runs that scored them some points on the backs of those runs alone. But I think in the long run, you're going to have to complete some passes down the field to back defenses off and run the ball the way you want to. And that's not even to say he has to throw for 300 yards a game. It's just you have to hit a couple of those to show defenses that we will try these passes and we can make them. Because until you do that, you're too one-dimensional to just be a ground and pound team. As easy as it seems to just feed the rock to Breece Hall and let him cook, it's going to be difficult to do that if you don't show the aerial dimension, because teams can just clamp down on Breece Hall, and then Zach Wilson from that point has to take advantage of the opportunities you get when teams stack the box. And the Lions game last year is the best example. And again, Breece Hall didn't play in that game, so it is a lot different because he is so ridiculously talented, as we're seeing. But that game is a good example of why at some point Zach Wilson has to show that he can punish defenses for clamping down on the run. Because in that game, the Lions had a terrible defense last year. They played a lot of man coverage, and in that game, they were even more aggressive than usual, played even more man than usual, and there were just great opportunities to push that ball down the field. They did everything to stop the run, but Zach couldn't really punish them for it. He hit a couple of deep throws that, a couple of them were just better catches than throws, but he really should have been absolutely popping off in that game. But he wasn't, because sometimes he wouldn't take the shots, sometimes he would miss them. But that was a situation where he had every opportunity to back the defense off and open up the run game, but he couldn't do it. And the Lions just continue to be aggressive, and eventually they win the game. They only give up 17 points. So that's what can happen if you're too safe. And especially that was the Lions. Over these next few weeks, we got the Cowboys, the Patriots. Chiefs obviously don't have the greatest defense, but Chris Jones will be back. So teams like that, if you're not going to beat them through the air and you're going to let them put extra bodies in the box with the talent they already have on the defensive line, it's going to be hard to just rely on the run game to move the football. Especially, you look at the Bills, they have a great defense, but Von Miller was out in this game, and that defensive line is good, but it's not quite at the level of the ones the Jets are going to see the next few weeks. So I don't think it's super sustainable to win the way that they did in this Bills game, especially with how important those turnovers are or were to that win. They got 4 takeaways, which is great, but they're not going to get 4 in every single game this year. So I don't think it's super sustainable. And Zach Wilson does have to make some plays through the air to complement this run game and allow the Jets to be able to thrive off of that.
Yeah, I think there are a few reasons to believe that Zach Wilson is going to be better than last year, because you bring up that Lions game, and I do believe that he's a different player. It's just how many strides has he taken since last year? I think the fact that it is a new offense is going to help him. Just hearing him talk about the offense, and yes, it's preseason, but the fact that he felt a lot of times overwhelmed and confused about the game plan last year, and that entering those preseason games this year, and I'd imagine it'll be the same for this regular season, he felt like he had specific goals. It was a simpler game plan. They took a lot off of his plate. And I think that also ties into Nathaniel Hackett being more of a player's coach. And, they released some of the mic'd up clips from Monday night. And I think that was one of the biggest moments, is you see Hackett kind of consoling Zach Wilson. I don't know exactly what point during the game that was. You could see him talking to him directly after the interception, but the one that was mic'd up, the lights were off. So I think that was probably after he had led that touchdown drive, maybe. And just seeing the way that Hackett talks to Zach, if you buy into any of the reports from last year, LaFleur clearly struggled to relate to players. And, I think Zach kind of strikes me as somebody who probably got his confidence shattered very early on in his career. And I think that positive reinforcement could have been good for somebody like that. I mean, Hackett, when he threw the interception, he walked over to the sideline, and Hackett kind of gave him a smile, kind of laughed, and was just kind of gave him that feeling of like, it's okay. Like, you're going to throw interceptions. This is not the end of the world. And I think that Zach, coming from a small school, small town, going right into New York City, and then getting booed in his first ever home game, not to say he didn't necessarily deserve it with that performance. I think the big issue with him has always been mental. It's been the football IQ stuff, the reading coverage, the processing speed, but a lot of it has been his confidence has been shot from the beginning. The few times that we've seen him kind of get rolling in a game and get that confidence up, a lot of it has actually been in the fourth quarter, where he's had some of his better performances. You think about that Titans game his rookie year, you think about the Steelers game last year. He's had a few times, even first half against the Patriots last year, which ended up being a bad game for him, where his confidence gets rolling, he starts to feel himself, and you see that natural talent shine through. Because he clearly has the ceiling of a guy who can be a starter in this league. And that's why, I do trust Aaron Rodgers' evaluation of him. I don't just think, yes, he's his teammate and he's not going to throw him under the bus. But I do trust when Rodgers says this guy has the ability to be one of the better quarterbacks in the league. It's just refining some of the issues that he struggled with. It's a damn shame that he's not going to be able to sit back and learn for a whole season like we all wanted to. But he's still going to have Rodgers in his ear at some point this season. I don't think it'll be this Sunday. It might not even be next Sunday, but at the very latest after the bye, I think Rodgers is going to be on that headset or on the sideline, and perhaps even sooner. And so I think, new offense, a more player-friendly coach, and a coach that is going to focus on protecting his mental, maybe a little bit more than Michael LaFleur, who came out with that quote. Did you see that quote from LaFleur today, where he's like talking about the Rodgers injury? I get what he was saying, but he was talking about the Rodgers injury, and he was basically like, no one cares. And he's not necessarily wrong. Like, it's kind of similar to what Bill Parcells was saying. And he was talking about Vinny going down, and it was an article this week, and Bill was just kind of saying, like, 2-3 weeks from now, people aren't going to be talking about the Rodgers injury as the reason the Jets lost that game. They're going to be talking about that Zach Wilson interception or, the Breece Hall fumble or whatever. People don't care. They move on. That was Bill Parcells' more eloquent way of saying it, but LaFleur's just kind of like, nobody cares. And it was just very, very callous. And I read that and I was like, yeah, geez, no wonder this guy kind of struggled to relate to players, especially a guy like Wilson, who, let's just be honest, might need a little bit more coddling than your average NFL player. But I like the fact that all those things, it's his third year. We know the ceiling he has. If we can build that confidence. And then the last thing is the team around him. Because if they had Breece Hall, AVT, and Becton last year, Michael, despite how badly Zach Wilson played, I think they make the playoffs last year, don't you?
I think they do. I think some of those games go a little differently because Breece is such a creator on his own that I think, in spite of some of those stacked boxes, they could have run the ball. Like the first Patriots game, for example. I think he creates enough to put them over the top to win that game. And maybe the Lions game or the second Patriots game. So Breece is just, with this game, really has proven that he's that good and that much of a difference maker. So I think they do. But yeah, I mean, we'll see how much of a difference that can make as the season goes on, because that was one of the biggest parts of the fall off at the end of last year, was that the run game wasn't there either. And part of it was, what I was saying about Zach Wilson not making it easy for the run game because he's allowing teams to stack the box. But part of it is the fact that, look, by now we know Breece Hall is a lot better than Michael Carter and my guy Zonovan Knight, of course, and James Robinson. So I think it's going to raise the floor to have Breece and AVT there. And at this point now, Zach is 5-0 with Breece Hall. So go ahead and hang your hat on that if you want some optimism. Breece and AVT are on a 5-game win streak together. So you do have that. But
and you had him
back. Yeah, and on that point of Hackett and LaFleur, that was another thing I noticed. Like when I saw the clip of Hackett consoling Wilson on the sideline, I was like, this is where I think Hackett's going to make the biggest difference versus LaFleur, because I think, schematically, maybe LaFleur is a little bit of a scapegoat because, we saw a lot of open receivers that just weren't hit because of Wilson and other quarterback struggles. But, he was in the booth all the time. He was never on the sidelines. And then we never heard a lot of praise about LaFleur as a leader in the way we hear it about Hackett. And even like I went to a couple practices and just watching LaFleur, even though he's a younger guy, he is a very old school kind of dictatorship coaching style. I really kind of gathered it didn't really seem like he was, and he's like the opposite of Hackett. He's kind of like a drill sergeant, just kind of commanding guys around, a lot of yelling and pointing, not as much. This is just from my 2 practices that I went there, just kind of observing. But I mean, between that and like the Elijah Moore controversy and just overall not hearing, like I said, a ton of praise. Like, how many quotes did we hear about, like, oh yeah, Mike LaFleur, he's just an amazing guy to be around. He calls it the gold zone.
They hired him to be the nerd, to be the schemer, the Adam Gase.
Exactly. So I think with Hackett, like you're getting a guy who, we'll see schematically how it plays out throughout the season now that Rodgers isn't there, but at least in terms of having a guy who on the sideline on game day, and throughout the week is just going to be a much better guy to have in Zach Wilson's ear. I think you're absolutely getting that. And plus Downing is there. So they have an extra guy in that, in that line of people who are there to coach the quarterbacks. So it's not just Calabria and Rodgers, of course, which I obviously should have mentioned, but like last year on the sidelines was just Calabrese. That's it. Yeah. LaFleur's up in the booth. Flacco is, let's be honest, Flacco never seemed like he was too interested in mentoring. And you didn't have like a passing game coordinator. So it really was not ideal as much as Wilson struggled. He did not have great leadership around him, but it does feel like he has that now. So it's a much better spot for him, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, this is still the same guy he drafted 2nd overall. And obviously he is disappointed up until this point and is, I'm not trying to get anybody's hopes up, but this is the formula the Jets went to back-to-back AFC championships with Mark Sanchez, a great defense, and a great ground game. It's the same formula that Nathaniel Hackett and Robert Saleh went to the AFC championship with Jacksonville, and Blake Bortles with that great defense and Leonard Fournette. And I think that's, we'll see. Is that sustainable in today's NFL? I don't know, but I do know that this Jets defense is going to keep them in a lot of games. And I know that Breece Hall, Becton, AVT, trio is going to score some points. And Zach Wilson is still the guy you drafted second overall that has that ceiling of all those traits that were so enticing. It's just the mental stuff and the emotional stuff that we just have not been able to, he's not been able to figure out. And, if they can get him rolling and get his confidence going, I do think that he can at least provide them some sort of stability. And if not, they're not going to sink this season on him. If they get to the bye and he's lost, 4 in a row and he's really just imploded, I think they'll make a move for somebody. I think they'll make a move for somebody probably next week, and we'll see how Sunday goes. There's a report that they're interested in Brett Rypien, which is unfortunately the kind of veteran you were talking about, like the very, very low ceiling veteran who's had some experience in the offense. I'd hope they would go for something a little bit higher than that, the Jacoby Brissett's, the Gardner Minshews, but we'll see exactly what they do. I do kind of feel like they might go with the free agents as opposed to the trade route. There's also Josh Johnson. I thought that was an interesting name that was floated around. But they're going to bring in somebody that will at least provide them some level of stability on offense because this team is too damn good. The key now is that the rest of the team has to stay healthy. And if the rest of the team stays healthy, I do think this is definitely a playoff team. And it's just, let's just, as a fan base, we have to rally around Zach Wilson. There's no other choice. We can't be booing him off. I was there Monday and people were booing Zach. And that was a game that I feel like the interception was bad. I guess he was a little late on a screen to Garrett Wilson. There are probably some other play. There's the 3rd and 5 in the red zone that you kind of pointed out to me where it's like he could have hit, I think it was Conklin or somebody on a slant, or Cook was, there's a few negative plays, but all in all, he didn't make that many mistakes out of the interception. And this fan base is going to have to rally around him, especially when he plays New England the next week, because that's going to be the real game that he's going to have to exercise some demons. But when you look ahead to this Sunday, I would actually argue, and you tell me if you agree with this, that as impressive as Monday was in terms of rallying after the devastating blow right at the start of the game, and all those guys going in at halftime, and probably I would imagine word spread fairly quickly that he popped his Achilles and that he's going to be done for the year, and the fact that they came back, rallied, and won, that's impressive, and the Jets deserve a ton of credit. But I think that this Sunday and the ensuing weeks are going to be more telling, and it does start this Sunday, in terms of, that injury happened in the moment. They're in the game. They're playing. There's no other choice but to focus on the present. Nothing's confirmed. It's a new season, whatever. But now that you've had the day, when you wake up Tuesday morning and you go to practice and you watch film, or then when you wake up Wednesday morning, you go to the walkthrough. And for those veterans, those Dwayne Browns, those Al Woods, those Randall Cobbs, Dalvin Cooks, all those guys that came here thinking that they were going to compete in a Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers, now have to kind of take a step back. And, this is still a very talented team, as we've said, but have to, deal with the ups and downs of a young quarterback. How are they going to handle that on Sunday? How are they going to handle that if Zach Wilson has a fumble 6 to Micah Parsons and that defense is out there? How are they going to handle that if the offense is putting a lot of strain on the defense early, or if the offense isn't able to, convert much? They're going 3 and out a lot. I think this week is going to be very telling and is arguably more adversity than the adversity they faced Monday, because they've had a chance for the reality to fully set in and to have to go through a full week with Zach Wilson as your quarterback and not Aaron Rodgers. What do you think about that, and just kind of the mentality of this team entering week 2?
That's a really good point, because, there's no taking away from how impressive it is that they did rally and win that game in spite of seeing their quarterback go down on the first drive. They absolutely deserve so much credit for that. It's very impressive, but the way you laid it out, that is a fantastic point, because it's a totally different type of adversity now, as you said, because, in that moment, like, yes, it's tough, but there's still that season opening adrenaline and the energy from the stadium, a lot to feed off of to fight through that. But how do you do it now when you've shown up and number 8 isn't there in the building anymore? And, he's making Instagram posts and like all this stuff is setting in. Like, wow, the number one reason that we were hyped every single day for the past 6 months is gone. It's out the window already. Now, how do you react? That is the big challenge going forward. Now that the game day adrenaline has worn off, and especially, you mentioned the veterans, but how about a guy like Garrett Wilson, who at the end of last season, I mean, how many times did we see him pouting on the field after a play because Zach Wilson couldn't get him the ball? And now he's your quarterback again. So it's a talented team. They've got all the upside in the world, but now they're really going to be tested from a mental standpoint. So I'm very, very much looking forward to seeing how they respond to it. And it's a big challenge for Saleh. And I think he passed the first test tremendously, getting those guys to, stay focused and fight through and win that game. It was one of the best coaching performances I think we've seen from a Jets coach and coaching staff in recent years to win that game. But let's see how they could, keep it together the rest of the season.
Yeah, and it's not just LaFleur. I think Hackett's mentality and coaching style kind of reverberated throughout the entire team. Because in those clips, you see Alan Lazard talking to Zach and telling him, you feel it now, the pressure's off your shoulders. I mean, Alan Lazard's coaching him up. Garrett Wilson's coaching him up after that touchdown. You see, even I think it was the start of the second half I was watching, you see like Quentin Jefferson come up to him, Al Woods come. I mean, all these veterans kind of came up to Zach and are showing their support for him because I think they have no other choice. They know that their season lies on his shoulders. But the truth of the matter is that it doesn't all have to be on him. They do have this defense and this run game. Zach is going to have to make some plays, and any strides that Zach makes in terms of reaching anything close to the potential that he has, this team is very much alive. And so, it's not the season we expected, but I'm still excited. This is a 1-0 team, 1-0 in the division. That Bills game is absolutely massive. And now we switch gears here, and to see how many of these early season games, which are incredibly difficult, how many of them can they steal? It starts Sunday against Dallas. Let's hop into this preview.
Quick question.
We're talking. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you think Zach should avoid shaving for the rest of the season? Maybe get some facial hair going. Maybe establish a little bit more of a leadership presence. I don't know. Just it kind of feels like year 3, he should have a little bit more of a veteran look to him. Sam Darnold got it going.
That's true. Though if it comes in kind of patchy, I don't know if that helps his kind of boyish energy. I will say I did notice
gritty and tough. It's kind of like you're surviving and fighting.
Am I crazy, or did I notice a difference in his kind of demeanor and his eyes because I rewatched the broadcast, rewatched the film, but from the stadium you can't really see any of his his body language, the way his eyes look, but he seemed a lot more in control of the moment. Maybe it's just because things have spiraled so poorly, and maybe it was just all the adrenaline. But am I crazy, or did it seem like he did seem a little bit more comfortable out there in a tough spot?
I mean, I will say the one thing I thought was impressive was the video from practice that came out a couple of days ago where he was just dancing. Like him and Billy Turner were dancing, and like he was dapping up Becton, and it just seemed like
fun again.
Yeah, like there were a lot of fun vibes going on. So that was cool to see. I mean, also, this is another thing that kind of goes through my mind. Do you think, like, I love all the support he's getting 100%, but are you somewhat off put by the fact that like it feels like he needs this much support? I mean, I get it. I think it's outstanding. No. I love that they're doing it, but like, is it a little troubling that like it feels like he needs that much support rather than him kind of taking on the leadership role?
I guess so. I guess I would say no. It's not concerning that the team is doing that because it's obviously the situation. But yeah, like I think there have been a lot of concerns about Zach's mental makeup in terms of, is this guy really an NFL QB? Can he overcome just the realities of being an NFL QB and how hard it is to make those intense decisions under pressure quickly, getting booed in New York? Like, is he, in a scouting report, the 3-car garage kid coming from Utah, he's a Mormon, like all that, playing in front of no fans at BYU and having the best offensive line. Like he was kind of coddled, and then he's thrown into, the fire right away. And yeah, like I do think that he doesn't have the same mental makeup as some of the other quarterbacks that have come in and kind of have that natural grittiness to overcome things. But I don't think that that's impossible. The thing that I always kind of go back to is when, I forget his name. This is bad on my part, but we had a guy, his name was Jeff. I'm trying to remember his last name. But he came on and after the Jets had drafted Zach Wilson, maybe it was right before, just to kind of give us the Zach Wilson overview. And this is a guy who's been scouting him, I believe, since high school. You know what I'm talking about? Remember the pod? We've done a lot of them. And the one thing he said, he was like, he basically said, I think this guy is going to be like Josh Allen, and he's going to really struggle his first year. He might even struggle his second year. But I think by that third year, like at least this is what happened at BYU, and this is how he kind of foresaw things, that he was going to be able to get it together. It's just once he gets comfortable and once he gets that confidence up. Jeff Hansen. Thank you. Shout out Jeff Hansen. That once he gets comfortable, once he gets that confidence up, once the team's a little bit better around, like once he feels like an NFL veteran, he's going to be able to let that talent shine. And I think too often his first 2 years, I mean, you think about some of those really bad throws that he missed his first 2 years, like those receiver screens, those little dump offs and stuff. That's not a skill issue. That's a mental issue. That's a nerves thing. And I think that, I think Monday was a big step for him. This Sunday is arguably an even bigger step for him. And week 3 at home against the Patriots, I think is a massive step for him. We'll see how he faces this test. But if he's able to get past week 3, I feel very good about him delivering somewhere in that 20th, which is kind of what we said, 20th ranked quarterback play, which I know is like a very low bar. But I believe that if he can get through that New England game and not implode, which we haven't seen yet from him, I believe that he can deliver a level of quarterback play where they are comfortable with him, for the rest of the year. Let's hop into this preview, though. We'll start with the Jets offense versus the Cowboys defense. And, man, that Cowboys defense looked pretty damn good against the other New York team on Sunday Night Football. 40-0. We have our exact numbers up here, but they were just pressures all day, sacks, fumbles, interceptions. I mean, they looked like they were playing with their hair on fire. The one thing I'll say, though, Michael, you tell me if you agree with me. I rewatched it. I rewatched the film for the Cowboys game, and yes, very impressive. Micah Parsons is a world beater. Kind of some fluky plays in there. Can we just acknowledge that maybe that game isn't the best read on what this Dallas Cowboys defense is? No, don't get me wrong. I still think that they're very good, but the Giants drive all the way down the field against them on the first drive, look great. Then bad snap by the rookie center, and then they have to kick a field goal. The field goal's blocked, return for a touchdown. Then I think it was the next drive that Daniel Jones throws a dump off to Barkley in the pouring rain, and the ball bounces right off Barkley's hands, pick 6. And then Daniel Jones threw another bad intercept. I mean, like, it just snowballed for the Giants, and you don't want to take much away from the Cowboys defense, but in those conditions, and then it's kind of some fluky plays that, the Giants were down big at the start of the second quarter. Just maybe that's not the best read on things as opposed to having, a few games to kind of judge. What do you kind of make of the Cowboys' dominance week 1, and how afraid are you to face them on Sunday?
Well, I agree. I think in terms of looking at the Cowboys 40-0 win and viewing that game as an all-around dismantling, I think maybe is slightly misleading because, like you said, there were some fluky plays in there that kind of facilitated it. You have a blocked field goal return. You have a pick 6 that was just a drop pass that popped into the Cowboys' hands. So, but at the end of the day, you can't take away from a 40-0 blowout too much. And this was a really good team last year. Obviously, the Cowboys have their struggles in the playoffs each year, but it's still a team that won 12 games in each of the past 2 seasons, and they're usually one of the most dominant teams in terms of point differential. Like, they lose some close games, but they dominate a lot of their wins. So, and they have plenty of talent on both sides, especially in the trenches, especially defensively. So it's a very talented team. I even in my preseason predictions, I have them winning the NFC and losing the Super Bowl to Cincinnati. That was my preseason prediction. So yeah, I think this is a fantastic Cowboy team. But at the same time, I think it is fair to say, like, let's not overreact to one game here, especially with some of the fluky things that happened in that game, and act like it's an insurmountable task for this Jets team. I think the Jets do have what it takes to make this competitive, at least cover that 9.5 point spread, which is surprisingly high, and potentially steal this one. That's not to say I think they will, but I think they can pull it off. It's because, like I said, the Cowboys, I think the trenches is where this team is built, and the Jets are built kind of the same way. And as we'll talk about, they have some parallels with this team in terms of
A lot.
the coaching staff and the backgrounds, the way that they play. So they're both built pretty similarly. And, if we're going to say it's a lot this year, but if quarterback was more even, I think you could chalk this up as a very close matchup. It's not anymore, and that's something the Jets are going to have to work around. But in a lot of other areas, I think the Jets are built to compete with the Cowboys.
Yeah, the teams are built fairly similarly. I mean, especially on the defensive side of the ball, the Cowboys have one of the few defensive lines that I think can rival the Jets, and then also one of the deeper defensive lines. They like to rotate. You mentioned the coaching staff similarities. Dan Quinn, Robert Saleh and Jeff Ulbrich have both been under Dan Quinn, coming from that same Legion of Boom, Seattle Seahawks defense. But then even on the offensive side of the ball, Mike McCarthy was an offensive assistant under Paul Hackett, Nathaniel Hackett's dad. And so their offensive system, which is a little different after firing Kellen Moore, has a lot of Hackett similarities. So the offense and the defense coaching-wise are pretty similar. And then the roster construction, like you mentioned, being built through the trenches, having a dominant defensive line, a deep defensive line, all very similar. The big X factor is the quarterback. And the way I see this game playing out is a defensive battle. And it's, like the Giants last week, you can't make those mistakes. So that's why I do think you're going to see, I don't know if this is the week where they say, all right, Zach, let's build your confidence. Let's open up the playbook. He might have to make some throws, but I do think this is kind of similar to last week. I think the whole game plan will be built around Zach, and they'll do some passing concepts that he's comfortable with. And he's not going to only throw 15 times or whatever, but a lot of runs, a lot of screens, quick passes, RPOs. And it's all going to be about not making the big mistake, not turning the ball over, and forcing Dak Prescott, a guy who has struggled with the interceptions, into making those mistakes. This Jets defense, like you said, maybe they're not going to get 4 turnovers every week, but they had some bad turnover luck last year. I think that this team is going to have a lot of turnovers this year. Dak turns the ball over. I do feel like if the Jets, it's very cliche, if the Jets win this turnover battle, I think they win the game. Do you agree with me?
I think if they win by 2, if they win the turnover battle by 2, I think I feel good. They won Buffalo by 3. I think if they can get at least 2 more turnovers, they can win. One's a little dicey for me, potentially, but if they can get 2 more, I think they're going to be in a good spot. But yeah, I agree with you. I think protecting the ball is going to be the biggest key in this game by far. And, that as long as they can do that, I think then you put yourself in a position to potentially win on the strength of the other things your team does well, on the run game, on the defense, and even the special teams, which hopefully that can be a fixture going forward. You're not going to score a punt return touchdown every single game, but hopefully it's something that can be a consistent strength and turn the tide in some important spots. So yeah, if the Jets can keep themselves to ideally 0 in the turnover column, I think they have a shot to win this game, especially if they can get multiple takeaways. Because you go back to last year, the Cowboys, when they force 1 or 0, when they themselves have 1 or 0 turnovers, they're 11-1. When they turn it over at least twice, they're 3-5. So if you can get a couple takeaways and have 0 yourself, I think you put yourself in a good position to steal this game.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a defensive battle, and I don't mind seeing Morstead out there and punting, because I do trust this defense to contain this Dallas offense. It doesn't scare me as much as this Dallas defense. I do think they're going to be able to bait Dak Prescott into some interceptions. The big thing is going to be stopping the run and Tony Pollard. They throw the ball to him a ton. Quincy Williams is going to have another big game. But if they're able to contain Dallas's offense the way I think they will, I mean, if DJ Reed's talking about this defense as an 85 Bears, a 2013 Seahawks, it's not going to be perfection, but I do think that if they're talking like that, they should be able to contain this Dallas offense. The big thing is going to be, well, you just can't give them the ball in plus side territory. You can't be throwing pick sixes or fumble sixes. You got to just, if they can protect the ball and run the football, and if they have to punt 10 times this game, I still think they'll have a chance, because I think this defense will keep them in it. A few notable Cowboys that'll be out of this game. The Jets, outside of the most important player, are fairly healthy. Although, actually, I forget, Greg Zuerlein has a groin injury, and so they worked out some kickers. That's definitely a storyline to keep an eye out for, because that is one of the things where it's like, okay, maybe this Zach Wilson-led offense isn't going to score a ton of touchdowns, but with Breece Hall, with Garrett Wilson, they should be able to get in field goal range a few times. And you need to be able to knock those through. So hoping Greg Zuerlein's able to give it a go. But if not, whatever kicker they sign is going to be put to the test. But for the Cowboys, Brandon Cooks seems doubtful. That's a big one for the Cowboys. Tyler Smith, and you can get into this one a little bit, part of that great offensive line. He's going to be out, and we'll be met with the old friend, Chuma Edoga, starting at guard for the Cowboys. And then also safety Donovan Wilson is going to be out for the Cowboys. It does seem like Zach Martin's going to play. So the Cowboys dealing with a few injuries themselves. But yeah, let's start with the offense. We touched on one of the main keys, which is taking care of the football. But Michael, when you look at this Cowboys defense and specifically Micah Parsons, this defensive line, DeMarcus Lawrence, what scares you? What are some of the big matchups that you are keeping your eye out for on Sunday?
Well, obviously it all starts with Micah Parsons. And I did an article on this at Jets X Factor, but I think really the only way you can stop him is to just not even give him a chance to get after your quarterback. Get the ball out quick and neutralize the pass rush in that way. Because you look at last year, and he had a pressure rate above the league average for edge rushers in 17 of the 19 games that he played. So all but 2. And in those 2 games, it was the Commanders game early in the season and a Texans game later on. And in both of those games, the quarterback had a time to throw that was one of the top 5 fastest in the league that week. So that's really the only thing you could do to truly stop him, is to, go with the game plan we've been talking about. Get the ball out quickly, protect it. So I think those things kind of match up. If you want to quiet Micah Parsons in this pass rush, and if you want to protect the ball, you got to get the ball out quickly. And obviously there are, consequences of doing that. It's not just a foolproof plan. And the consequence is what we saw in this Bills game, a lack of explosiveness in the passing game, and, sort of dink and dunk mentality that might not score you a lot of points in the long run. But I think for this Jets team against this specific Dallas defense, and in this point of the season for Zach Wilson, his first start, I think that is the way you have to play. I think you have to play it safe, protect the football, and don't let Zach Wilson in his first start commit multiple turnovers and, have a terrible game that could develop some bad habits that might persist throughout the year. I think the best case scenario is to have him progress slowly, work him in, build some confidence, and then as the season goes on, then you start to air it out, unlock the playbook a little bit more, and, try to get that linear progression for him. I think that's the best case scenario. So playing into that and considering the very talented defense they're playing, I think you want to get the ball out quickly and do everything you can to make sure this pass rush doesn't even get the opportunity to make plays, even if that means you're limiting your ceiling and it might look boring and you might punt sometimes, kick some field goals. I think you have to do that in this game and count on your defense and your special teams and your run game to go win you this football game. So considering that, I think some of the keys for the offense in this game, I think it's very important that the screen game is effective. Good blocking from the receivers, good blocking from the linemen out in space. We can't have Lake and Tomlinson just jogging around and blocking nobody. We got to be good on those screens because it's going to be a big way to move the ball if you're getting the ball out quickly and neutralizing the pass rush, not throwing it deep. Your screens have to be effective. And then I think yak is going to be really important in this one. Again, if you're not going to be throwing it deep too much, you got to find ways to be explosive and move the ball. So whether it's Garrett Wilson, the running backs, the tight ends, got to force some missed tackles in space and find ways to electrify this offense in ways that aren't bombing the ball down the field. So those are, I think, some of the biggest keys for the offense.
Can I maybe walk back on one thing that we've said? And I might look like an idiot for this because I do agree with you for everything you're saying. But the Cowboys, 6th highest man coverage rate last week, 32% of the time. I do think Zach Wilson has been better against man coverage. I agree it's going to be an ultra-conservative, run-the-ball, RPO, screen type of game. But if the Cowboys are doing what the Lions did at the end of last year, like you talked about, and just loading the box, playing the run, not respecting Zach Wilson's ability to beat you deep at all, do you think that maybe they should dial up one of those play action, maybe a little slug over Garrett Wilson? He's going up against the guy in Trayvon Diggs who likes to bite. Diggs will give up some big plays trying to fight for the interception. So that is kind of one of those matchups that I'm eyeing. It's like ultra conservative game plan, But I do think you have at least one or two shots in the back pocket, specifically with that Garrett Diggs matchup. If you can get that one-on-one matchup and get a little double move on Diggs, he will try to bite. And Garrett is clearly has the talent to beat him deep. I think we've seen some improvement with Zach's deep ball accuracy. I mean, only a little bit in preseason, but that deep ball to Malik Taylor is enough in the preseason is enough for me to buy in the fact that I think accuracy has improved. Do you think they mix in any of those deep shots, especially if Dallas is getting ultra aggressive?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, even like saying the game plan should be conservative doesn't mean every pass has to be. It's just, from an overall perspective, what's the mentality? It doesn't mean you should never throw deep. So I agree with you. I think that's going to be important because if you want to run the ball, like I said plenty of times earlier, you also have to command some respect with the passing game to lighten up the box and get some room to run. Because one thing that a lot of people have suggested, especially based off this Bills game, is that the Jets should continue to use a lot of 2 tight end sets, 3 tight end sets, which they even did in this game a lot, and just pound the ball that way. Well, one of the side effects of doing that is that the more tight ends you have on the field, the more linebackers the defense is going to put out there, the more guys they're going to put in the box, the less space there is to run the ball. So it's not always as simple as just, let's get our tight ends out there, let's ground and pound it. You got to be able to create space through the respect of the passing game, through pre-snap motion, through good scheming, all that stuff, to be able to create advantages in the run game. And throwing the ball is a great way to do that. So especially on play action, I think that's where I'm looking for Zach Wilson to be successful in this game. Like you mentioned, play action, go ahead and hit, Trevon Diggs with the stutter go, whatever it is with Garrett Wilson. I think that is going to be your opportunity to make plays. I don't think we want to see Zach Wilson drop straight dropbacks too much in this game, because that's when you really let the pass rushers have a chance to tee off. But play action, especially if it can be a rollout, something like that, a couple of shots like that per quarter, per half, I think you definitely want to work those in. And if Zach Wilson can successfully hit even just say 1 or 2 in the first quarter or the first half, just big plays, whether it's intermediate, deep, off of play action, then I think they can command the respect that's going to force the Cowboys to back off a little bit. And then the Jets can run that football and play the brand of offense that they're going to want to play in this game.
Yeah, and those are also the type of turnovers that I think you can live with, because, if Zach Wilson throws a 50-yard bomb and it gets picked off, well, like Allen last week, those were kind of pseudo punts.
Right. Yeah.
Doesn't matter. It's not as, I'm trying to think, not as bad as when you throw like a 10-yard route over the middle and it gets picked off by Leighton Vander Esch, and now the Cowboys are starting on the plus side 35-yard line. One of the other few keys that I think, and something I think we're definitely going to see this season, I wonder if we're going to see it as soon as Sunday, giving Xavier Gibson some snaps on offense. Partly for 2 reasons. One, he has the chemistry with Zach. They work together all offseason and training camp. But 2, I think if you're going to go with this kind of conservative, quick passing, RPO, screen type of offense, you need guys who can make guys miss after the catch. You need those yak plays. Gibson definitely showed that in the preseason. I think of that Giants game. A number of times he was thrown too short of the sticks and he was able to get a first. And then obviously, he got the ball one time. I guess he had a few returns and a fair catch or whatever. But to win the game against the Bills, big time play, and he made a lot of guys miss. I think he's certainly a weapon returning kick. Give him some of those end arounds, quick receive screens, some plays like that, just to show something different to this Cowboys defense, get them moving horizontally. And he's a guy that I do believe can make guys miss and can get first downs. I guess the same would go for Mecole Hardman, who didn't get any run with the offense last week. But like you said, I mean, as good as Ruckert and Conklin were on the run game, and you're definitely going to see a heavy dosage of 12, I agree. You have to mix in that 11 personnel if you want, or even 10 personnel if you want to kind of open up some stuff underneath for Breece and so lighten the box a little bit for the Cowboys. What do you think about the Mecole Hardman, Xavier Gibson, getting some guys who can create some yak on the field just to try to create some offense?
I mean, Hardman was interesting. The fact that he didn't play a single offensive snap. I mean, I haven't been the biggest Hardman fan throughout this offseason, but I never thought he should or would play 0 snaps in a game.
Well,
so that was interesting. Yeah, I mean, the game plan changed. They lost Rodgers, but I didn't think that would completely remove him from the field. I guess, maybe if Rodgers didn't go out, maybe they wouldn't play as much 12 personnel, 13 personnel, and some of those snaps would have went to Hardman, like maybe some of those Ruckert, Uzama snaps would have been Hardman's. So maybe I'm sure we'll see at least some snaps of him. And then I agree. I think getting Gibson in there makes a lot of sense too, because, I like Randall Cobb. I still think he has things to offer at this stage of his career. He's still a solid route runner, still has really good hands. But from a playmaking perspective with the ball in his hands, that's where he doesn't have a lot left. And that's where someone like Gibson and Hardman could be a lot more effective than him, because you got Gibson or Hardman the ball, and they are home run threats wherever they get the football. And the Jets need that in this offense. Now that I think you feel less confident that you have a quarterback who's going to, get chunks of yardage down the field and, have 8-play drives where he goes 5 for 5, 50 yards, or hit an 80-yard bomb. Hopefully at some point Zach Wilson develops into someone who can do that. But to this point, you can't trust him to be that yet. So I think having guys who could make plays on their own with the ball in their hands is more important than a Randall Cobb, who's more of like a, like I said, like methodical drive down the field type of guy. And there's value to that too, because, Zach Wilson could use a veteran who knows where to sit down against zone, can win a slant on third down. So he has value too, but I think there's probably more value to be had in the explosive play guys. So if they can find ways to get snaps to Gibson and Hardman, or at least one of them this week, I think that would be a plus.
Or anything else in the offense before we move to the defense? Any other matchups you want to touch on? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it goes without saying that, Dwayne Brown and Becton against Parsons, and Dwayne Brown is going to be big, but
or DeMarcus
if they go with the game, and I say Dwayne Brown going against Dwayne Brown, but I guess I've been watching the Rodgers sack highlight too much. I call it a highlight. Whatever. Our minds are out of control after this game. Regardless, tackles against those edge rushers, obviously huge. But if they go with this game plan that we're talking about, a lot of quick passing, I think they could be able to neutralize that and like
more cut blocks.
The importance of it, more cut blocks, which Rodgers is a huge fan of, as he confirmed on the McAfee show. Just not when David Bakhtiari does it. But I'm looking at the interior
quickly. Yeah, not to derail us, but just because you mentioned the McAfee interview, any thoughts on that? Do you think he's just? I don't want to give anybody false hope, but he really didn't want to. Kind of seemed to me like he was kind of alluding to the fact that if the Jets are able to make a deep playoff run, he's going to try to play. It seems improbable for a 40-year-old to be able to do that, but same surgeon as Cam Akers, who did in 5.5 months, and he's a running back. I mean, is that just a complete pipe dream? None of us are doctors, but it seems probably like a complete pipe dream. I mean, I guess the good news from that whole interview is the guy seems motivated and he's going to play in 2024. Yeah. So we will see Aaron Rodgers in a Jets uniform. I did think that was maybe he's just going to kind of keep us engaged for the rest of the season. But if the Jets are, I guess the thing is if the Jets are good and they make the playoffs with Zach Wilson and they go on any sort of run, I don't know if they would switch him out. I mean, like, unless they're really just winning in spite of Zach Wilson and Rodgers is able to hobble around enough where they feel somewhat confident in him. But maybe that's just a conversation for another day. I don't know if you have any thoughts on McAfee's interview with Rodgers.
Oh yeah, I thought it was super promising for Jets fans. Just the motivation that he showed and the clear competitive drive that he had to get back out there and prove people wrong. It really felt like just it's only going to add to the story of, kind of redemption and proving people wrong that he was already on. So it was promising. And in terms of that, like I highly doubt it. Like even if he came back for the Super Bowl, what is that, 5 months from now? So It would be quicker than Akers, who, yes, he's a running back and it's more strenuous than quarterback, but he's also like 12, 15 years younger than Rodgers.
More.
Yeah. So it would be absolutely shocking. But I mean, Rodgers is very deliberate with what he says. I think
he's listening to Dolphins Mate. He said that's
he's listening to Dolphins Mate. That could speed up his healing process. So he's got access to some things that maybe other people find unconventional.
Give him all the special vitamins. I don't care. Just inject them with whatever
special vitamins, whatever. Yeah. I mean, as McAfee said, he could go see Dr. Joe Rogan, an esteemed medical professional. So I don't know. I mean, I just think it was interesting because, like, I don't feel like Rodgers says things just to I was gonna say he doesn't say things to mess with people. Maybe he does, but I just feel like he knows the impact of what he's saying. I feel like he wouldn't say that if he didn't truly believe that there was somewhat of a chance. But I highly, highly doubt it.
It might be delusional, but it might be what he needs to kind of hold on to the way
Right.
he's going to attack rehab every single day. I think it's a lot more depressing for a guy like that to be like, fuck, I have to sit around for the next 6-7 months doing nothing, and there's no chance I can if he attacks his rehab thinking about playoffs in mind, that could pay dividends, even if it doesn't happen, even if this season falls apart and it's all moot, or even if the Jets are in the playoffs, but it's still like, hey, it's not wise to throw you out there. At the very least, he'll have made all that progress in terms of the last few months or the next few months, and it'll pay dividends come 2024. I don't know. Obviously, all our wishes to Aaron Rodgers, and listen to all the Dolphins mating that you need to, and all the special vitamins. All right, back to Zach Wilson. Sorry, I forget. You mentioned McAfee, so I figured I'd chime in there. I forget what you were talking about.
I was saying I had one last offensive key. I think the interior run blocking is pretty important, and the reason for that is I feel like the edge rushers are going to be very aggressive trying to tee off in the passing game on Zach Wilson and these tackles. So I think in the run game you could exploit that and kind of naturally take them out of the play just by allowing them to rush themselves up the field. And then through that, I think you get more space to work on the interior. And then that's when it comes down to, can Laken Thompson and McGovern and AVT make that one last block to open some big holes right up the middle? I think that's where they're going to be able to do some damage in the run game, because as much as Micah Parsons is a sack artist, he can make plenty of plays in the run game too, and the same goes for DeMarcus Lawrence. So I think they can make plays on the outside as well, but I think the main source of the rushing attack is going to be straight up the middle, allow the edge rushers to be aggressive, rush themselves up the field, and then you have some opportunities for your interior guys to make key blocks. So I'm looking at the interior run blocking.
All right, let's talk about the defense. I think that's all great keys. We'll see what the Dalvin Cook, Breece Hall splits look like. I do think we're going to get a little bit more Breece, but they got to be careful. It's a long season, and this is why you brought in Dalvin Cook, was to kind of take the load early. Actually, as much as I just said, let's get to the defense. What are your thoughts on Cook? Because clearly Breece is far head and shoulders the best. Even that first run, that's the first play of the game. What do you think that gains? Like 3 yards maybe? The fact that Breece bounces that and is able to have patience and slips inside Uzama and makes that a 30-yard run or whatever it was, that's the difference between him and Cook. And he's still not even at full capacity, but you also don't want to burn Breece out. You don't want to risk injury. He is the offense going forward. Great fantasy pick by myself, I have to say. So what do you think the Cook-Breece split looks like this week? Is it any different?
Well, I mean, right now we're only one game in, but not on the greatest pace in terms of me buying a jersey. He's only at 2.5 yards per carry right now. So
yeah, it was the bet was 4.5 by buy.
Yeah,
which I think was a little steep, but whatever.
Only a little bit more than halfway to that mark right now, so he's gonna have to pick up the pace. But yeah, I think we'll see a gradual shift towards Hall, because, like you said, it's a long season. And as much as it's clear that Breece Hall is head and shoulders above Dalvin Cook, I don't think you want to overreact after one game and say, okay, here you go. Here's 20 carries in the second game. Like Robert Saleh said it, Hall was begging for more touches. He's saying, you could take me off the pitch count or whatever. And Saleh said, that's why you're on a pitch count, because you were going to say that. So I think we're going to see that gradually each week. Like this week, it was I think Cook played 50%. Hall was somewhere around 30% in terms of snaps. So maybe next week, this game against the Cowboys, maybe it's like Cook 45, Hall 35. Then maybe the next week they're even, and then week by week we could see that shift towards Hall. But yeah, I mean, in terms of Cook, I think there were some flashes when they got him outside of good speed and good, slipperiness through the hole. There's that one run where he did a nice job, kind of directed it outside, bounced inside the tight end, and kind of went back out through that hole. So there were a couple of nice runs, but I think we also saw some of the stuff tendency that he showed last year, because that was a big part of his game. a big weakness in his game last year was a high rate of being stuffed. And, Hall in this game was running behind the same offensive line, and he didn't get stuffed quite as often. He found ways to turn 1 to 2 yards into 4 to 6 yards just by, an extra bounce here, a little bit more vision there. Like you said, that first run of the game when Hall got 26 yards, that's probably a stuff for Dalvin Cook in that same situation. But Hall had the patience to let the hole develop. He had the burst to get through it. Dalvin Cook's probably running right into that wall on that play. So I'm a little concerned with that. But in other areas, I mean, he was active in the screen game, didn't drop any passes. He only had one blocking rep, and he had a really good pickup of Milano. So good start in that area. Just one rep, but good start. Didn't fumble the ball. So in those areas, good start. But yeah, I would like to see fewer stuffs from him. And a big part of his game is the home runs too. And you can't hit a home run every single game. So as the season goes on, we should hopefully see some more home runs here or there from him. Not in this game, but Breece Hall is also not going to have an 80-yard run in every single game. Or maybe he will, because he's now gone a few games in a row with a big play like that. So we'll see.
All right, now we'll get to the defense. I mentioned him a little bit earlier, but Tyler Smith out, Chuma Edoga in, going to be matching up against his draft classmate, actually, Quinn Williams. And I guess we'll start there. That's the biggest matchup right there. We get the Quinnen on Edoga. What are some of the other big matchups you're paying attention to? And just kind of keys as a whole, it's kind of hard to judge what this Cowboys offense is going to look like because it was such a rainy, ugly game, and they got off to such a hot start that they were just running the ball a ton. So again, kind of like last week, we were trying to decide what the Bills offense would look like. It's a little harder, but we get to see, all right, Dallas likes to run the ball a lot. They throw to the running backs a lot, but how much was Dak limited by the rain and the fact that they were up a lot? So yeah, I mean, I obviously stopping the run and forcing those turnovers is key, but what are some of the matchups that you're keeping an eye on?
I think starting with that Quinnen Williams, Chuma Edoga matchup, you got to see absolute dominance there. I think if the Jets are going to win this game, it all starts with Quinnen dominating that matchup. Because, I mean, Jets fans watched Chuma Edoga, and that was at tackle, which was his natural position. Now he's inside at guard, which, apparently seems to be working out better for him. But
yeah, remember people used to call for that all the time. Like Chuma at guard,
so,
and I guess concerns over his anchor.
Credit to them. So, but I'll put all my money on Quinnen every day in this matchup. So Quinnen on that right side against Edoga being the left guard, they're going to see each other a lot. 2019 draft class reunion here. So hopefully Quinnen can do a ton of damage to really anchor the defense in this one. But sneaky matchup I'm looking at here. Al Woods against Zach Martin. No one really talked about Al Woods and what he did in the Bills game. And, it wasn't the most amazing game of all time, but just looking at his snaps in the run game, you could really see how he eats up space and makes life difficult for the opposing run game. So Zach Martin, obviously one of the best guards in the league of the past decade, still firing on all cylinders. Great player. So I'm curious to see how Al Woods can match up against Zach Martin on that interior run game, because the Jets pass rush is going to tee off on Dak Prescott. You got to get those third and long situations. And to do that, you got to stuff some early down runs. So I want to see Al Woods have a good game against Zach Martin, clogging up that interior run game.
Yeah, let's look at the secondary a little bit. Sauce Gardner got a lot of criticism for his game on Monday, even though the fact that his worst game is still as good as some corners' best games. At the very least, it was an average game for most corners. But yeah, maybe a little bit of I don't even want to call it that. I'm not going to give into that. Gave up, like 60 yards? And he was very key in forcing that third interception to Whitehead. Big matchup for Sauce, though, going up against CeeDee Lamb. He's not going to follow him, but I'd imagine there's going to be some of that matchup. And I feel like Lamb is the type of receiver that really kind of plays into the things that Sauce does well, whereas Diggs is the smaller, shiftier, faster receivers. Those are some of the guys that can get inside on Sauce a little bit. We saw him burn Sauce last year on the first plays of the game, and Sauce was able to get it under wraps. Then on Monday, Diggs beat him a few times, nothing crazy. Lamb, though, terrific receiver, great route runner, but I think he's a little bit more physical, a little bit bigger, and I think that kind of plays into Sauce's hands when he's able to get physical with the bigger receivers.
Yeah, I mean, the Diggs performance for Sauce was, I think, Diggs won the matchup for sure, and it was probably Sauce's worst game, but they're there are a lot of corners in the league who, if they went out against Stephon Diggs and allowed 3 first downs, like I think it was 59 yards, and doing that with the other team dropping back 51 times in an overtime win. And, the longest catch he gave up was, like, I think that 26-yarder to Gabe Davis. There were no touchdowns. There were no penalties. That would be one of their best performances of the season. For Sauce, though, the standards are just so high. But yeah, it wasn't his greatest game. He missed a couple tackles underneath. I think that was probably the worst part of the game because some of the completions he gave up. I mean, Allen obviously had a bad game with the turnovers, but he made some really good tight window throws to Diggs against Sauce's coverage. But it's really the tackles that Sauce missed that were more concerning. So it's not something you expect to persist, but, tough matchup here again for the second week in a row. So, yeah, another tough matchup, and he's going to have to bounce back quickly. I'm very excited to watch that matchup, but DJ Reed, who always gets slept on, and he had 2 big, really big plays in this Bills game.
Jordan Reed, if you ask Stephon Diggs.
Jordan Reed, I mean, do you think he said that on purpose?
No, I think it was an innocent mistake, honestly, but we're going to run with it. Bulletin board material. He mixed up Whitehead and Reed, whatever.
I think you're right. I think, yeah, he was thinking of Jordan Whitehead, but regardless, it just continues the trend of DJ Reed being mysteriously overlooked. But yeah, he had the forced incompletion on the first drive of the game, and then the last one in overtime to force the punt. So some great coverage plays for Reed in that game. And then he's going to go up against this Cowboys receiver unit that probably isn't going to have Brandon Cooks, but they have depth with Michael Gallup there. So that's going to be a good matchup to watch as well. So Jets cornerback unit, tough battle in week 1. Wasn't their typical dominance that we saw last year, but considering the opponent, I think it was still a plus game. And then now they get another good QB receiver combo in week 2.
Yeah, another big game for the safety duo. Obviously, Jordan Whitehead with the career game on Monday night. Tony Adams, I thought he played pretty well in the rewatch. I mean, I think a little bit of some.
Actually, it just occurred to me. Maybe he called him Jordan Reed because when he was thinking of Jordan Whitehead, he confused him with Ed Reed because the way he played in that game.
Yeah, great point. Great point. Because the thing that kind of surprised me, and I guess it shouldn't have been surprising because the Jets did do it last year, but all offseason we've been kind of talking about Tony Adams as the true center fielder, free safety that the Jets have been missing, and then they have, at the time Chuck Clark and Jordan White is kind of the more box safety guys, but it has been the status quo for Robert Saleh defense to kind of mix and match your safeties, having them interchange who drops in and who takes the middle of the field. And it was kind of surprising to see the success that Jordan Whitehead, I called him Jordan Weed, Jordan Whitehead had as a middle of the field defender, and then manning Tony Adams up underneath, or even playing in the box at times, kind of spying out. And what did you kind of make of the mixing and matching of Adams and Whitehead? A little bit so than we thought they would do.
Yeah, it was kind of surprising. Looking at the charting here, and PFF had Whitehead playing 48 of his 68 snaps as a deep safety. Adams only 31 of 67. So, yeah, a lot of interchangeability there with both guys. Sometimes Whitehead dropped down, sometimes Adams did, but it was Whitehead who played more of those deep snaps. And in situations where there was only one deep safety, it was Whitehead more often than it was Adams. So pretty surprising. Not what I expected at all. I expected it to be the other way around. Like, we knew that interchangeability was going to be there, but I figured if one guy was going to be back there more often, it was going to be Tony Adams. But I mean, you can't argue with the results for 1 week at least, because Whitehead was snagging everything. So if he keeps that up, I mean, by all means, the Jets knew what they were cooking there. But I am curious to see if it's sustainable, because it definitely doesn't line up with what we thought Whitehead's strengths were. But maybe he turned a corner.
I think that the big thing is that they trust Tony Adams' man coverage over Jordan Whitehead. So if they're going to go cover one looks, it makes sense to have Whitehead be the middle of the field defender. But I also think Whitehead's a guy that the coaching staff has been very high on. And then, last year, some big plays, but also some miscues, and we'll see if that continues. But a second season in the system should do wonders for him. I think a game like he had on Monday is going to be big for the confidence, and we'll see. He won that game for the Jets on Monday. There's nothing else to really say about it. I mean, 2 of them were punts, but really that third interception, that's all Sauce and that's all Whitehead right there, kind of manipulating the sideline there and forcing Allen into a mistake. And they're going to need to do that again against Dak Prescott. We can get into some predictions. I'm trying to check if there's anything else we wanted to touch on here. Or I guess Carl Lawson's return. We'll get him when we do the predictions. We can predict who's inactive, but it'll be nice to get another member of this Jets defensive line in the mix. Lawson another year off the Achilles. I'm curious to see what his explosiveness looks like because he looked so damn good before that Achilles injury. And last year he still had 7 sacks and a ton of pressures, but and then he's been dealing with back injury since training camp. But he seems healthy now. He's going to play. And I think that's going under the radar, but that's a big deal for this Jets defensive line. And, going up against this Cowboys offensive line and beating Smith and beating Steele off the edge. I'm curious to see how they use Lawson. I still think Jay is going to be their starter in base packages, but I think it's possible you see McDonald inactive and Lawson get some of those reps. We'll see. But I guess before we go to predictions, anything else in the defense, whether it's Lawson or anything else with these linebackers or safeties, just now's your chance.
Yeah, I mean, what we were talking about with the safeties, I think what they did last week is super important to keep up because, I mean, safety last year, that was what we considered the main weakness of the defense. But in this game, it was probably the main strength with what Whitehead was doing. So we already know the Jets have great cornerback play on the outside. They have a great pass rush. But now if you have safeties who are going to take away the deep game, the way Adams and Whitehead did, and I think you should throw Adams into that too because Whitehead got the interceptions, but still, the Bills rarely attempted and never completed anything that was deep over the middle. And Adams deserves credit for that as well, just for handling his roles and not allowing those throws to be open so the Bills could attempt them. And Adams had a couple of mistakes coming down and making tackles, whether it was setting the edge in the run game. I think he missed a couple of tackles coming down as well. But in terms of deep coverage, like the opportunities just weren't there for the Bills. And they wanted to attack that. Like if you're scheming against the Jets, you'd rather go against the safety in his third career start, the second-year safety in his third start, and Jordan Whitehead, who's not known as a deep cover guy. You'd rather go against them than DJ Reed and Sauce Gardner. So they wanted to do that, but they were just denying those opportunities. So if they're going to continue to cover deep like that, it just brings a whole another element to a Jets pass defense that already has a lot to it. And then the linebackers. Let's talk about them real quick. Quincy Williams, what an amazing game he had against the Bills. Kind of flew under the radar a little bit with Jordan Whitehead playing the way he did, the pass rush. But, I mean, Quincy was fantastic in this game. Like, he was making plays all over the field, but most importantly, he was doing it efficiently. It's not like, here's a highlight play, but then here's 2 missed tackles at the cost of that. No, he wasn't missing anything. He was making every play he was tasked with making. In coverage, he had that huge pass deflection at the end of the first half. So that's another potential new element for the Jets defense. Last year, I think you would, the linebackers were solid, but there were times when it was weak. There were some games where it was a weakness, whether they were missing tackles or not the greatest in coverage. But if Quincy's going to take a leap like that, which, it can happen for linebackers. Remember when Demario Davis had that late breakout for the Jets? So it can happen. If Quincy's going to continue being that solid and efficient, then that's just another hole in the defense that's plugged. So if the linebackers and safeties up the middle can build on what they did last week against a very good Bills offense, it's going to do a lot for this defense.
All right, Michael, let's get into, I guess before the predictions, we have 2 things we want to get to. We started this last week. I guess we'll continue it. The Jets X factor of the game. Ironically enough, Michael, you chose Mekhi Becton, not a bad pick. I chose Dwayne Brown, which in retrospect was.
I mean, look, it wasn't totally his fault.
It wasn't his fault. It wasn't his fault. But he wasn't the best. I don't know if I want 39-year-old Dwayne Brown cut blocking. He was a bit of an X factor, but Garrett Wilson was open. Rewatching that play, it does seem like Rodgers was trying to hit Uzama. There's your Uzama. I think he was trying to hit Uzama up the seam and was just trying to hold the ball so he could draw the linebacker in.
It seemed like he was nervous, really. I mean, and you can't blame him just after all the buildup.
Yeah, I think definitely some butterflies, but I also think, it's like with the cut block, he's got to get the ball out quickly. If it was a true pass set, I don't hate what he was trying to do there. If you look at the way the play was developing, he was trying to draw the linebackers underneath, and then he was going to hit Uzama over the top for a big play. it's unfortunate. It sucks, but it is what it is. But with that said, Michael, Jets X Factor. Yeah, and then obviously they're the obvious picks, but trying to find somebody a little bit more under the radar. I mean, obviously we could go with the Zach Wilson pick here, but somebody who's really going to have a huge impact on this game. Zach Wilson would certainly qualify as that. Is that your Jets X Factor for Sunday, or do you have somebody else in mind?
That's too obvious. That should be off the drawing board for
Okay,
the
fine.
rest
No
of the season.
quarterbacks.
No quarterbacks allowed. I think I got one here, and I mentioned it before, but actually, you know what? I was going to say Al Woods, but because I mentioned that already, I'm going to pick something different. I got a different one. I'm going to go with Jeremy Ruckert. What a game he had blocking. And I'm being serious. I'm not joking. What a game he had blocking in week 1. I mean, the Breece Hall 83 yards doesn't happen without him. And he had multiple other very dominant blocks in the open field on defensive backs. So, I mean, when you have tight ends who can block like that, that is how you unlock the home run hitting for running backs like Breece Hall, because, you can get to the first level with good O-line play, but to get past the second level, that's when the skill guys come in, and Ruckert was just amazing in that first game as a blocker. So if he can do that in this game and continue to do it throughout the year, I think we could see Breece Hall continue to hit those giant home runs that can really spark this Jets offense that needs those runs even more badly now. So I'm going to go with Jeremy Ruckert here. Sneaky, important player in week 1 and going forward.
When was the last time the Jets had a tight end that could block like that? I know you don't want to overreact to one game, but I remember the fall off from, I'm trying to remember, was it Ben Hart? You might be before you, but Ben Hartsock, I think, in 2009 was a pretty dominant run blocker and
Eric
tight end.
Tomlinson.
No, before that, he just kind of
he had his moments. I know. I'm just saying blocking tight
But the
ends.
Jets have not had that dominant run blocking tight end. And Ruckert, hey, we got to see it a few more times. But man, that draft class is so damn good. And I think Paul always talks about the silent tape. Ruckert's silent tape spoke volumes, and I think that you're going to see him overtake Uzomah. Another good prediction by you, Michael. I got to say, people came at you a bit this offseason for some of your takes, but one weekend aging pretty well. I agree with you. I think Ruckert is definitely going to overtake Uzomah. We'll see how quickly. But that's a great pick. That's a great X factor, specifically.
Although, I mean, is he
an
X factor? I mean, he's like an underrated key, but okay.
I think so, because they're going to have to run the ball a ton. And they're going to have to, they can't go.
He could be like I said, he could be the difference between that 80-yard run and a 20-yard run.
Exactly.
So,
the thing is, the Jets can't get down early, because they can't be put in a position where they have to throw a ton, and then they're in those true pass sets, and the Cowboys pass rushers are able to just tee off on Zach Wilson. They have to be able to play that game of managing the clock, keeping Zach Wilson in those third and shorts, running the ball. And Ruckert, like you said, is a crucial part of that and a crucial part of springing somebody loose. On the flip side of that, though, the defense has to uphold their end of the bargain. And I think a big player, I'm stuck between two of them. I'm going to go with Quincy Williams. I was stuck between him and Mosley, but I'm going to go with Quincy Williams because the Cowboys are going to throw underneath against this Jets defense. You're going to see a lot of that like we saw against the Bills. They're going to target Tony Pollard in that passing game. Dak Prescott is going to run a few times. He's going to throw over the middle. Quincy Williams is going to have to do what he did on Monday, which was he was the Jets, as I said, he was the Jets version of Matt Milano. You don't want to put him in the same stratosphere as Milano yet, but in terms of an athletic linebacker who just takes away all that grass underneath, Quincy Williams showed he can be that guy on Monday. And we didn't see the same level of miscues that we saw in 2022. We got the highlights without the miscues, as you put it on Tuesday's podcast. So for me, Quincy Williams is a big X factor in terms of, getting the Jets off the field on third down when Dak tries to dump it off to Pollard or he tries to run, potentially creating a turnover. I just think that underneath game is going to be critical for the Jets because I feel pretty confident about their four-man rush against, this Cowboys offensive line, which is still good, but I trust this Jets D-line. I feel good about this Jets secondary against the Cowboys weapons. It's all going to be about the Cowboys underneath game to the running backs, the tight ends, Dak scrambling, extending drives. And a guy like Quincy, I was stuck between him and Mosley, but I'll go with Quincy. He can really have a big impact on this game. Last thing before predictions, where are the Jets better between the Jets and the Cowboys? Let's start with the quarterback. Pretty obvious. We'll give it to the Cowboys.
Before this, we were reading an article from a Cowboys perspective, and we disagreed with it. We thought it was a little too pro-Cowboys, so we'll try to be fair here, not super homers.
They said Dak Prescott was better than Zach Wilson. What the hell? Running back, we're going with the Jets. Brees Hall, biggest difference maker. I like Pollard, but no running back in this game is on Hall's level. Receiver, this is one that kind of sparks some debate because I think it really comes down to CeeDee Lamb versus Garrett Wilson.
Well, with no Cooks in this game, I think that's a big game changer.
Yeah, it's Garrett and Lazard versus CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup.
Pretty close to a wash, I'd say. But then I think you have Cobb plus Hardman, and then the Cowboys have after that Devontae Turpin. I know that's literally me Googling what they have.
We'll get here.
I don't think it's biased to say Jets.
It's close.
Close enough to say push.
I'll go push.
Probably.
I'll go push.
Yeah.
I'll go push. Tight end. I'll go with the Jets here. I was watching the Cowboys game. Not impressed with those Cowboys tight ends. It was rainy conditions, but kind of a few drops there, including a touchdown. I think Conklin, especially. You mentioned Rucker. Conklin doesn't get enough credit for his blocking.
Yeah, he had a great blocking game too, and he had a big one on the Brees Hall 80-yarder.
Offensive tackle, Smith and Steele for the Cowboys, Brown and Becton for the Jets.
Gotta go Cowboys for now.
Gotta go with the Cowboys, but I gotta say Becton looked pretty damn good on Monday night. It's interior offensive line. Lakin, McGovern, AVT versus Chuma Edoga, Biadish, and Zach Martin. Zach Martin's pretty great. AVT's also pretty great. Chuma Edoga, not so great. Lake Tomlinson, not so great. Really comes down to Biadish versus McGovern.
I give it to Cowboys. They have Zach Martin, who's the gold standard, really. So O-line definitely is Cowboys.
Defensive line, though. Defensive end, this is a tough one, too. I guess we've been doing defensive end, defensive tackle. I guess we'll count Parsons as a defensive end. And because of that, it's hard to go against the Cowboys here. But, I guess you have to go Cowboys with Parsons and Lawrence. But with JFM, Jermaine Johnson,
Fowler,
Carl Lawson.
And Dorrance Armstrong had a big game.
No, they're deep. All right,
really
we'll go defensive end. But I do think we get the Jets on the board here with defensive tackle.
Yeah.
Do you agree with me there with Quinn and Williams?
Yeah.
The Cowboys have a good defensive tackle rotation as well with Hankins and Mozzie Smith. Also, they have somebody that I've read his name a lot. I'm going to try to pronounce his name for the first time. You'll hear Jim Nantz try to say it as well. Odi Gizua.
We're getting Jim Nantz this week?
Osa. Yeah, we get Jim Nantz and Antonio Romo. Apologies for the mispronunciation, but he's pretty damn good as well. Showed up on the film. But both teams are strong in the trenches. I think the Cowboys have the edge there, but the Jets with Quinn and Williams get the defensive tackle. Linebacker, this may shock you. I'm going with the Jets. How do you feel about that?
Yes.
Quincy and C.J. Mosley versus Van Der Esch, and they lost a rookie to an ACL. I'm trying to remember the Marvian Overshawn. He tore his ACL on that. Great turf, but I feel like the Jets win that linebacker battle as well. Let's go corners. This was one that we very disagree with a lot. They gave the Cowboys the corners with Diggs and Gilmore, who are no slouches, but the Jets with Sauce and Reed and MC2, I have to get the Jets corners in this one. I'd go to my grave saying this. I would debate any Cowboys fan. The Cowboys have some good corners, but I'm taking the Jets.
That's quite the thing to go to your grave with. The Jets corners
are
better
than
the Cowboys corners.
Go to bat. I don't full of malapropisms on this podcast, Michael. Do you agree with me though?
Yeah, you got to respect it. It's a good. Gilmore, obviously, former defensive player of the year, but he is, and he had a really good interception last week, and I think a couple breakups in addition to that. But latter end of his career, he's declined a little bit. Still good, but the Jets' production last year spoke for itself. They were clearly the number one cornerback trio, and first game this year didn't really show anything to dissuade you from that. So I'm going Jets.
And last thing, safety. Whitehead and Adams versus Donovan Wilson and Jerron Curse. Wilson's out, actually, so it's Malik Hooker.
Wilson's out, too. Curse.
Malik Hooker and Curse versus Whitehead and Adams. I'm going with Whitehead just had 3 interceptions.
Yeah, I feel like preseason we'd probably say wash just because wasn't proven yet, but I don't know. After
They have
that
a
game,
starter down.
yeah, I guess we can go Jets here.
All right, so final tally. Jets get running back, tight end, defensive tackle, linebacker, corner, and safety. Cowboys get quarterback, the entire offensive line, and defensive end. We did push at receiver. Oh, special teams. We forgot about special teams. I mean, Cowboys blocked a field goal and returned it for a touchdown. Jets ran back a punt. Jets might not have Zerline, which could be
Might not
kind
have
of
your
a
kicker. Yeah, you could say push.
All right, fine. At this point, only the diehards listening anyway.
So we gave more positions to the Jets, but a lot of important positions for the Cowboys. They got quarterback, they got the whole O-line, and they have the edge rushers, just on the strength of Parsons.
Just
obviously.
the four most important. Yeah, sorry, the three most important parts. But
other than that, we're good to go. I mean,
right,
corner
Michael.
and defensive tackles.
All right.
Yeah,
but
there.
Quarterback, offensive line, pass rusher. Those are three pretty big wins for the Cowboys.
Pretty big.
All right, Michael, let's get into some predictions here. First, predicting the inactives. How do we see this one playing out?
Yeah, I mean, Eccles is back this week, right? So that's one extra guy.
Who you didn't have last week. Probably sign Boyle to the active roster, or do they elevate him?
Probably going to sign him, right? It doesn't seem like they're, unless they plan on signing someone this week. So, I mean, what do you think?
I'll go 5 inactives. Brownlee. Well, it's tough because, I bet you Irvin Charles is going to get cut. But, all right, I'll just do it off of top of my head. Brownlee, Irvin Charles, Zaire Barnes, Banacanda. Man, I guess Will McDonald.
So I guess for now, we're assuming they're going to keep. Wait, so who's going to? Oh, well, Rodgers went to IR, so that's Eccles, right? And they're not going to bring up Boyle to the active roster yet?
Not more roster gymnastics. This pod is not built for it. Shit.
Way too much already.
All right. I said they signed Boyle to the active roster. Sign Boyle to the active roster. Cut Irvin Charles. Your 5 inactives are Tittman, Abanikanda, Brownlee, Zaire Barnes, and Max Mitchell. There you go. There's your 5. Keep McDonald active. Why not?
All right. I agree with that.
Okay.
No, I agree with that. That's probably what I would have said because I want to keep McDonald up. And they have enough O-line. Like Schweitzer and Turner can hold down the backups spots because Schweitzer can play interior. Turner can do tackle and guard.
Best case, worst case. This is always kind of dumb, but let's just kind of walk through the best case game script. Michael, I mean, we all know worst case is the Zach Wilson turnover show. I mean, if the Jets if the worst case, honestly, is if the defense can't really hold up their end of the bargain in the fight, and they get down to an early, or the Cowboys get out to an early lead. The Jets have to throw. They're in 3rd and longs, taking big sacks, and Wilson tries to play hero ball, and he throws a few interceptions, and this is a blowout, and the Jets have to regroup, head back home to MetLife, and face Zach Wilson's mortal enemy, Bill Belichick. That's the worst case scenario. Best case scenario is that this defense dominates this game, and it's a defensive slugfest that the Jets are able to run the ball pretty effectively. They're able to control the clock. They're not going 3 and out every time they get the ball. I'm not going to say that they go off offensively, but if they're able to hold the ball, get a few rushing touchdowns, maybe Zach Wilson's able to make some key throws in a big spot, maybe even one big deep throw on a double move to Garrett Wilson, calling it now. And this Jets defense is able to create some turnovers. That's your best case, and the Jets are able to squeak out a low scoring, win. But if that's what happens, Michael, I think you feel pretty damn good about this rest of the season. But any thoughts on best case, worst case? I mean, it's pretty cliche. Best case, everything goes well. Worst case, everything doesn't.
Exactly.
All right, fine. Random predictions.
I was going to give.
Okay, yeah. All right,
go
ahead.
Worst case. So I think the over/under for this game, if I recall correctly, is 38.5, which was one of the lowest in the league this week. So I think if the Jets are going to win this game, I think it's going to go under that. I think it's going to be like a 20-17 or 17-14 type of game if they're going to win this one. I'm not totally confident that if this goes into the 20s that they're going to have enough firepower at this early stage of the season to pull it off. I think later on in the year, there is the potential for Wilson to work his way up, get some more confidence, and potentially be the type of quarterback who can win some of those games. But if he's going to get there, I think it's going to take some time. For now, I think they're going to keep it safe, going to keep trying to win on that defense. So if they're going to win, I think they're going to have to, like I said earlier, I think if the Jets if they have 0 turnovers and force at least 2, and I'll throw in one more key in addition to that, run for at least 5 yards a carry, I think they have a chance to win that type of game with 2017, something like that. So I'd say that's the best case scenario.
What would they run for last week?
I forget what the yards per carry was. I mean, I know Brees was ridiculous. He was 13 yards a carry or whatever. Yeah. I'm gonna check that right now. But
I gotta say, your game script, the game script to the best case scenario sounds very similar to last year's victory against the Bills. Zach Wilson kind of in that quick passing manager role. Maybe he gets one big. I mean, they took the deep shot to Mims to open up the game. Maybe he gets one big pass, but a lot of it is like Zach kind of managing the game, the Jets winning the game on the ground, defense creating turnovers, keeping it close, and winning at the end of the game. I mean, I think that's kind of what you envision if the Jets are able to win this, is it kind of squeaking it out at the end. What was the average? Did you pull that up?
Yeah, they averaged 6.1.
Oh, nice. All right. All right, let's hear worst case.
Worst case, I think kind of is the opposite of that. I think you lose the turnover battle. I was just about to start rattling off a bunch of negative things. I got to try and think of a way to frame it in a way that's like not the nightmare scenario, but also not ideal. I don't know. I think
offensive lines get decimated. It would start with the Jets not being able to block Micah Parsons and the Cowboys at all, and Zach Wilson just taking a beating and turning the ball over, and then putting the defense in the field too much, and not able to take the ball away. The Cowboys just doing whatever they want and just getting blown out. I mean, that's worst case. Pretty much exactly what happened to the Giants.
Yeah, so I would say on offense, like you said, offensive line is where it all starts, which is why I think the best thing for them to do offensively is to get the ball out quick. Don't even give them the chance to do it. Call some bootlegs, things like that. So it starts with the offensive line on offense. And then defensively, I would say, even if they, hold the Cowboys relatively low on the scoreboard, I would say what you don't want is to give up long drives that are time consuming, a lot of yards, and you're not winning the field position. I think you want to get, even if you're not forcing turnovers, if you can get some 3 and outs, that would be big. So sort of like the Seahawks game last year is kind of what I would think is like a negative outcome for the defense, even if it's not a terrible game. I think they gave up 23 in that Seahawks game, but they didn't force any turnovers. They didn't get quick stops, and they couldn't generate any help for an offense that really needed it that day. So I would say that's what a worst case scenario would be for the defense, aside from the obvious of they give up 50 points and get dominated. Just not making those big plays to help the offense is the worst case scenario.
All right. Prediction time. And I'm looking at your random predictions from last week. I had Brees Hall touchdown and Jermaine Johnson forced fumble. I mean,
ref's mic goes out. Did that happen?
No.
Why do I weirdly feel like it did?
I don't think it did, but you did have Gibson, big opening kickoff.
Oh, okay. So okay.
None of our predictions hit, but sub out Johnson for Clemens, sub out big opening kickoff for last play, game closing punt, and kind of close. Brees Hall touchdown. I mean, the condition was a little better. I would have been right on that, but let's hear it. I guess we'll go one offensive and one defensive random prediction. You could start. No thought goes into these beforehand.
That's why they're random, such as ref's mic going out. I feel like something like that happened. Maybe I'm just totally, clueless here. All right, offensive. I'm gonna say we're gonna get Elijah Vera Tucker touchdown catch.
What?
What do you think of that?
He's that guard, bro. No, I'm not writing that down. You gotta give me another one.
Okay.
Give something actual, please. You were kind of close.
Okay. I'm gonna go with. All right. Here's a good one. Jeremy Ruckert, 10-yard touchdown catch.
Okay. Ruckert, 10-yard touchdown catch. One for the defense.
And defensively, I'm going to say strip sack by Carl Lawson, recovered by Quentin Jefferson.
Covered by Jefferson. Wow. Good stuff. All right, here we go. Off the dome. I'll start with the defense.
I always go with the very, high-paying odds, let's say. Like, I'm not going like Garrett Wilson touchdown. Like, I'm
Right,
shooting for the stars.
I'm going to say CJ Mosley interception.
Okay, making up for the one he could have had against the Bills.
Yes.
Tough catch, but it was an opportunity.
And Zach Wilson rushing touchdown.
Okay,
which is maybe
he was
something
close. He was close to one, and
he was close to one, and maybe something we should have talked about a little bit more. Is I do think he's going to have to use his legs. I think that's one thing that they can use to open up this offense a little bit more. Get some read options in there, get him rolling out. He has the athleticism to be one of the better rushing quarterbacks. I mean, he's not in that Hurts Allen level, but he's maybe a tier or two below that. He's quite athletic. You saw in the preseason.
He does have legs. That's for sure.
He's pretty fast, dude. I mean, he can make guys miss.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
I think we didn't get to see that as much last year because he had the meniscus injury and then missed all of preseason and then came back week 4. And so I do think that get him out of the pocket, let him run a little bit. I saw Daniel Jones have
the Bucs run. Don't forget about that.
That's what I said, the one in preseason. He had some success. Daniel Jones had some success rushing against this Cowboys defense. So I think that's going to be key is, get him out of the pocket a little bit more. Get him away from those scary Cowboys defensive linemen. With that said, Michael, time for the final prediction, then we get out of here. Let's hear it. You said 27-20.
We both predicted them to win last week. Yeah.
Yes, I said 27-17, which was kind of close, right? Wasn't it 22-16?
22-16.
All right, we were.
So I was closer. I said 27-20. No. So I said they'd win by 7. They won by 6.
Okay, well, I had the Bills having 17 points. They had 16 points. I mean, it's pretty. Whatever. Let's hear you got a score prediction? You backing the Jets this week?
I'm gonna go with, unfortunately, Cowboys 18, Jets 18. It's a tie.
Come on. Can you be for real for like 5 minutes? We're about to close the podcast out. Give me a real prediction.
All right, Cowboys 23, Jets 10.
23-10 Cowboys.
I'm sorry.
All right. I mean, yeah, I think unfortunately, like Michael said, this is a tough matchup. I think you're probably wise to take the Cowboys in it and not bet Zach Wilson. But so I agree. I'm going to go
9.5 point spread in this one. So I have the Cowboys covering, which I feel like it's too big of a spread, but I don't know. I just have a hard time seeing the Jets putting up points in this one. Hopefully I'm wrong.
I'm going to go 24-13 Jets. I'm back at Zach Wilson, baby. I'm back at Zach Wilson. Yes. I feel I think the Cowboys are going to come into this game a little too overconfident. For some reason, I'm more worried about next week against the Patriots. I think you're probably wise to take the Cowboys. At the very least, I would take the Jets against the spread. I think -9 is ridiculous. But I trust this Jets defense. I think this Jets defense is as good as it gets. I think they're the best defense in the league. I think they're going to force Dak into some turnovers. And the Jets are going to be playing with house money a few times in this game. And it's just going to come down to their rushing offense, which I think you saw the Giants have some success early on in that game against the Cowboys. But then the game got so out of control that they had to be throwing. I think the big thing is for Zach is just turnovers and sacks. They got to avoid that. I think Zach can play with that mentality and that mindset. The Jets can win. Maybe 24-13 is a little high. I don't know. I was trying to map it out. Maybe 17-13. Maybe that's a better prediction. I'll go 17-13. I'm changing it. 17-13. But I think the Jets force it. I think they win that turnover battle. I think Zach Wilson is able to avoid the huge mistakes. And I think that Breece Hall, Mekhi Becton, AVT, and Rucker are able, and Conklin will throw them in there, able to block the Jets to a couple touchdowns. And they sneak out of there with a dub and 2-0. I think this team comes out and plays inspired. Now, the flip side of that is that they come out deflated and dead because they lost their quarterback. But, it's Friday. The Jets are 1-0. I'm going to buy into them. 17-13 Jets.
There we go.
All right.
Fair enough.
All right.
I mean, this is such a huge opportunity. Imagine if they win this game. I mean, like right now, the fact that they won the first game is so huge because we have hope. We have something to believe in, despite the fact that we lost Rodgers. But if they can win this game, get to 2-0, you come home, you have a chance to get to 3-0 by beating the Patriots and exercising the demons. It's
It's gonna be tough.
such a huge opportunity if you can win this game and just prove to everyone that we're here to stay, and especially for Zach, if you can come out and have a good game and show that what I can lead this team to success. It would mean so much. But the first game does kind of give them that buffer too, to where you can lose this game. Obviously, not that the players have this opportunity, but or this mindset, but from a fan perspective, you have that buffer to where you can lose this tough game, but you could still come back home and potentially beat the Patriots, go to 2-1, and you could go to 2-2 if you lose to the Chiefs. So the fact that they won that first game is absolutely huge, just for the life of the next few weeks, staying alive and still having some hope. But such a huge opportunity here.
Yeah. Last thing, and then we'll get out of here. I do think win or loss, the important thing is the Jets just play a competitive game and don't suffer any other major injuries. That's really what I want to see. Play a competitive game.
Would love that mindset.
Well, no, I guess that's setting the bar kind of low, but meaning just, I'm predicting the Jets to win, but I know that they're definitely heavy underdogs here. I think you just want to see the Jets play them close. Don't come out sleepwalking because of the Rodgers injury. You want to see this defense live up to the expectation and keep them in the game. And you want to see Zach Wilson play competent football. He doesn't have to be a world beater, but I'd like to see Zach make some plays. And if they end up losing it, in the end, because the Cowboys have the quarterback difference, so be it. You could take an NFC loss, you're 1-1, then you go back home to an even bigger game, another divisional game, and a chance for Zach to exercise those demons. That to me is the big game, the watermark for this team is that week 3 game against the Patriots. But hey, if they sneak this dub, they buy themselves a lot of leeway early in the season to figure shit out, at a time when the schedule is supposed to be at its hardest. So we'll see what happens Sunday. You can follow us at CYJ Pod on Twitter, Michael_Nania, myself, Ben W. Blessington. Go to jetsxfactor.com, best place to go for Jets content. Please rate, review, subscribe on iTunes. Subscribe to the Jets X Factor YouTube. I think that's it. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Man, that was a tough and tumultuous week for us Jets fans, but I feel good about Sunday for some reason. I don't know. Maybe I'm delusional, but we'll be back. We'll be recording Sunday nights. We'll be back Monday morning with our thoughts on the game. Stay tuned. Everybody have a great weekend. Go Jets.
Green on white returns this week.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Last thoughts, Michael. My bad.
First time in 2 years in the regular season.
The regular season, yes. All right. Green on white returns this week. We'll see if it brings any good omens. And if they win in it, maybe they wear it at home for the first time ever. Week 3.
Yeah, maybe. When was the last time they wore it at home?
In September would be the Bills game 2019.
Really? They didn't? Oh, okay, in September.
At all, it would be
that Bills game in
Raiders?
2021.
Oh, yeah, Bills game 2021. Yeah.
Very memorable game.
All right, yeah. All right.
Everybody
have a great weekend.
One last thing. I'm curious what you think of how the O-line played in this game, because I felt like it was kind of.
You could throw this in at the end of the I got dinner to go eat, dude.
Podcast. I just wanted
hour 43 minutes in. Thought about the
O-line. I
want to
bring it up because I just felt like it was a mixed bag. I thought the run blocking was really good at times, but also a lot of it was just Breece Hall creating, and the tight ends had some good blocks. And then pass protection, I felt like pass protection was weird. It was like it wasn't super consistent, but I felt like the pressures they allowed weren't that bad, if you know what I mean. Like it wasn't like they're getting completely dominated and they were giving up unavoidable pressures that destroyed plays. It was like they were getting beat a lot, but they were the kind of pressures that you could escape from. You know what I mean?
One guy was getting beat pretty consistently, but one guy can get beat on a lot of plays and you can survive. It's when two or three guys start getting beat. Yeah. I think you saw some good in there and then some bad. And, I think Zach Wilson's mobility is gonna help him out a little bit this week. But, man, we'll see if they're up for the task. This is probably the best defensive line they're going to face all year. The Eagles might have something to say about it. But they did have to go up against the Jets all training camp, so they are kind of ready for this. We'll see. I'm ready to get out of here. We can give our thoughts on the O-line after 2 weeks on Monday's pod. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Have a great weekend. Go Jets.